In April 1937, a German air fleet flew over a small market town in northern Spain, and, in 3 hours, burned it to the ground. The first time in history an air force had set out to destroy a defenceless town and everyone in it. The world recoiled in horror. The men who ordered it took notes, because this was not yet the Second World War, it was a rehearsal, and Spain was the stage. To understand how Spain became that stage, you have to see the country as it was in 1936. Not one nation, but two, sharing a map. On one side stood the Republic, a fragile young democracy of workers, unions, regional nationalists, and the landless poor. On the other, the forces ranged against it, the landowners, the church, the monarchists, and above all, the officer corps of the army. For years the tension had simmered. In July 1936, it broke. A group of generals launched a coup to seize the entire country in a single stroke. The rising was meant to be quick. It was not. In half of Spain, the generals won at once. The conservative countryside of the northwest, Castile, Navarre, and much of the south. But in the great cities, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, workers stormed the barracks and the coup collapsed. Overnight, Spain split in two, a nationalist zone and a republican zone, divided by a ragged front line. The decisive move came from Africa. The army's best troops were stranded in Morocco until German and Italian aircraft ferried them across the strait in one of the most large-scale military airlifts ever flown. A failed coup had become a civil war, and almost at once it stopped being only Spain's war. For the dictators of Europe, this divided map was an opportunity. Adolf Hitler sent the Condor Legion, some 12,000 German airmen and tanks rotated through to be bloodied in combat. Benito Mussolini sent more still, 70,000 Italian troops. They fought for the Nationalists and their rising commander, General Francisco Franco. For the Republic came aid from one great power, the Soviet Union, which sent tanks, aircraft and advisors paid for in Spanish gold. And from across the world came the volunteers, the international brigades, near 40,000 men and women from 50 countries who crossed borders to fight fascism in a land most had never seen. Britain and France, fearing a wider war, chose not to continue. They declared non-intervention and watched a one-sided contest unfold. By November 1936, Franco's columns had driven up from the south to the very edge of the capital. The fall of Madrid was expected within days. It did not fall. The city dug in, militia, residents, and the first international brigades arriving at the front line in the university quarter, under one single defiant cry. No partisan. They shall not pass. The Nationalists battered at the approaches through the winter and into the spring. The Jarama River and the Guernica, where Mussolini's troops were thrown back in humiliation. Madrid would hold for nearly 2.5 more years. Blocked at Madrid, Franco turned north to crush the isolated Republican strip along the Basque coast. And there, on the 26th of April 1937, the Condor Legion flew to the town of Guernica on market day, where the streets were full. Wave after wave of bombers, then fighters strafing those who fled into the fields. The town burned for 3 days. How many died is still disputed. Figures range from the low hundreds into the thousands. But the meaning was unmistakable. This was a deliberate experiment in terror from the air against civilians as a weapon of war. Pablo Picasso painted its name into the conscience of the country. The generals of Europe read it as a field test and filled in the results. Through 1937, the nationalist machine ground forward. The northern pocket fell city by city, Bilbao, then Santander, then the mines of Erusus. And with the north gone, Franco could mass everything against what remained. In the spring of 1937, his armies drove east across the Argonne and reached the Mediterranean coast. At a single stroke, they had cut Republican Spain clean in two. Catalonia in the northeast, severed from Madrid and Valencia in the centre. The Republic was now two shrinking islands, running out of everything. The Republic had one throw of the dice left. In July 1938, in a desperate bid to reconnect its two halves, it flung its army back across the Ebro River in the largest battle of the entire war. For nearly 4 months, they held the line against Franco's guns and bombers overhead. But it was the attrition the public could not afford. By November, it had been driven back across the river it had crossed. And with it went the last of its strength. Whatever hope remained had been spent on the Ebro. What followed came quickly. In the winter of 1939, the Nationalists swept into Catalonia. Barcelona fell, and ahead of the advancing army went the people. Near 500,000 refugees streaming over the mountains into France in the bitter cold. In the exodus, Spaniards still call La Retirada, the retreat. On the 1st of April 1939, Franco declared the war over. It had cost around 500,000 lives on the battlefield, and in the campaigns of terror, both sides waged their own lines. The Red Terror and the White. Franco would rule Spain for 36 years, and the watching powers who had tested their aircrafts, their tanks, and their tactics over Spanish towns folded away their notes. 5 months later, the rehearsal ended. On the 1st of September 1939, the real performance began.